He said his parents were out of town, but someone was upstairs. My name is Carl Harrison, and this happened last October when I was 19. I'd been casually friends with a guy named Tyler since freshman year. We weren't especially close, but we hung out now and then mostly for movies or video games. He lived off campus in this rundown house about 20 minutes from the university. The place looked rough, with faded yellow siding, a porch that leaned like it was tired of standing, and cracked steps that looked like they'd give out under your feet. He once told me the rent was ridiculously cheap, and honestly, the condition of the place made that believable. It was a Friday night when Tyler texted, asking if I wanted to come over and watch some horror movies. His roommates were gone for fall break, and he said his parents, who technically owned the house, were out of state visiting family. I didn't have anything going on, so I picked up some snacks and headed over. The street he lived on was unusually quiet, only a couple of streetlights worked, and most of the neighboring houses were either vacant or looked abandoned. I should have been more put off by that, but at 19, you don't think about stuff like that. Tyler greeted me at the door. He looked the same as always: hoodie, basketball shorts, messy hair. Inside, the house smelled musty, like dust and old fabric. The living room had mismatched furniture and a TV propped up on a coffee table. Typical college setup. We settled in and watched a couple of low-budget horror films. Nothing intense, just background noise, really. Around 10:30, we paused to order pizza. While we waited, Tyler offered a quick tour. The layout of the house was odd. Some rooms felt like they didn't belong where they were. One door opened to a brick wall. Another opened to what looked like a sealed crawl space. He joked that the house had been renovated badly by past owners and no one ever fixed it properly. The kitchen was narrow, barely fitting two people. The bathroom had one of those clawfoot tubs you'd expect in a black and white movie. His room was in the back, past a hallway that felt too narrow and too dark. I noticed the walls throughout the house were bare. No family photos, no artwork, not even a clock. It gave the place an empty, temporary feeling, like no one really lived there. The pizza came, and we went back to watching movies. Sometime after midnight, I started to feel drowsy. That's when I heard its slow, deliberate footsteps coming from above us. At first, I thought it was part of the movie, but the sound was to real dull thuds against wooden floorboards. I glanced at Tyler, expecting a laugh or some explanation, but he was frozen. He muted the TV and stared at the ceiling. I could hear each step clearly now. It sounded like someone walking slowly back and forth. When I asked what it was, he said something that didn't make sense at the time. There's no upstairs. I figured he was trying to mess with me, but he didn't look like someone pulling a prank. He looked pale, confused, maybe even scared. The footsteps stopped. Then we heard a dragging noise, something heavy scraping across the floor. Tyler suddenly grabbed his keys and said we needed to leave. No explanation. Just we need to go. We rushed out, barely remembering to lock the door. As we got to his car, I looked up. There were no lights on, no sign of anyone in the windows. But the house felt different now, like we weren't alone. We drove in silence for several minutes until he pulled into a gas station. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I pressed him for an explanation, and he finally gave in. He told me the house used to have a second floor, but it had been closed off decades ago after a fire damaged the upper structure. His parents had the access sealed when they bought the property. No staircase, no ladder, just reinforced ceiling panels and locked doors that led nowhere. As far as he knew, there was no way anyone could be up there. He said he'd never heard anything in the 2 years he'd lived there. Neither had his roommates. It wasn't until we were sitting in the car that we both started asking the same question. If no one could get up there, who was walking around? The next morning, Tyler and one of his roommates went back to check the house during daylight. They searched every corner, even the attic entrance and the back hallway, but found nothing. No sign of a break-in, no footprints, no disturbed dust, nothing. He called his parents, and they cut their trip short. When they got back, His dad went straight into the basement. Tyler said he came back up 15 minutes later, looking pale and serious. Whatever he saw or found, he didn't share, but by the end of that week, Tyler had moved out completely. I kept thinking about what we heard. I started to wonder if someone had been living up there, maybe a squatter who found a hidden access point. That seemed like the most reasonable explanation, still terrifying, but real. Or maybe the sound had echoed in from another house somehow, even though that seemed unlikely given how far apart the houses were. I tried to let it go. But a month ago, I was back in town for a friend's wedding. Out of curiosity, I drove by Tyler's old place. The windows were boarded up, and there was a for sale sign planted in the overgrown lawn. It looked worse than I remembered. As I sat in my car across the street, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. One of the boards covering the upper window had been pried outward from the inside. I stared at that gap for a long time, and I swear I saw the shadow of something move behind it. I didn't wait to find out more. I started the car and left. To this day, I still don't know who or what was up there, but the sound of those footsteps above my head has never left me. He showed me something in his basement. I regret going down there. My name is Dylan, and this happened about 3 years ago when I was in my junior year of college. I don't talk about it much, but I've never looked at people the same since. It started with a guy named Jake, a classmate I met during sophomore year in a statistics course. He was friendly in that casual, surface-level college way. We got along, grabbed food now and then, and studied together occasionally. I wouldn't say we were close, but we were on good enough terms. The kind of friendship that felt safe because it never went too deep. Jake lived off campus in a basement apartment of a rundown Victorian house that had been split into separate units. He used to brag about it a lot, said it was cheap, spacious, and way better than a dorm. He kept inviting me over, saying I had to see his setup. I always had something going on, classes, work, other plans, but in hindsight, maybe some part of me was putting it off for a reason I couldn't explain at the time. One Friday night in October, I finally gave in. Midterms had just ended, and I needed a break. Jake seemed overly excited when I told him I was free, like he'd been waiting for this specific moment. He told me he had something he'd been working on and that I had to see it. I assumed it was some nerdy tech thing, maybe a custom gaming rig or a home theater. Nothing too weird. At least, that's what I thought. I showed up at around 9 p.m. The house looked even worse at night: chipped paint, a sagging porch, an overgrown yard. Jake met me at the side entrance and led me down to his place. From the moment we started down the stairs, something felt off. There was a damp, moldy smell I couldn't ignore, like concrete after a flood, and the stairs were lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Jake didn't seem to notice. He was grinning like he'd just won something. At the bottom, there was a thick wooden door with multiple locks. He fumbled with his keys, muttering about how he'd been prepping this space for months. I made a joke about him running a meth lab, but he didn't laugh. Just looked at me and said, "You have no idea how special this is." The door opened to a surprisingly normal living area: couch, a TV, a few movie posters. But he didn't stop there. He led me to another door in the back. This one had even more locks, including a bolt that looked recently installed. My gut started to twist, but I followed him anyway. I told myself it was just Jake being weird. He told me to go in first and insisted he wanted to see my reaction. I stepped through into total darkness. Then the smell hit me, something chemical and sharp, like cleaning agents and plastic. Jake flipped a switch, and a row of fluorescent lights flickered on overhead. The walls were covered with photographs. Hundreds, maybe more. At first glance, it looked like some kind of strange collage, but as I looked closer, the reality became clear. These were candid photos of people, taken without their knowledge. Students walking between classes, eating in cafes, sleeping in library chairs. They were organized in clusters, each labeled with a name written in black marker. Then I saw my name. There were at least 50 photos of me. Walking to class, sitting in the dining hall, using my laptop in the student lounge. Some were taken from across the street, others from just a few feet away. One was of me asleep on a bench. My mouth went dry. He had to be standing right next to me when he took that. Jake stood beside me, watching for my reaction with this proud, almost childlike expression. He began explaining that he was building a complete archive of the people he encountered. Said it was about preserving real moments, things people never knew were worth remembering. His tone was calm, even cheerful, as if none of this was strange. I tried to keep my voice level and asked why he didn't just ask people for permission. He frowned and said that would ruin it. People change when they know they're being watched, he told me. This is the only way to see who they really are. I turned to leave, but then noticed a section labeled Special Collection. The photos there were different, darker. People through their windows at home. Someone brushing their teeth. Someone getting changed. Intimate moments they clearly thought were private. I recognized one girl from our statistics class who had dropped out suddenly the semester before. I'd always wondered what happened to her. I told Jake I needed to head out, that I wasn't feeling great. That's when his whole vibe changed. His face went blank, and he stepped between me and the door. Not yet, he said. There's one more thing. In the corner, he pulled a sheet off a group of monitors. They lit up immediately. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing, then it clicked. These were live security camera feeds. Places I recognized. The coffee shop near campus. The hallway outside my dorm. Even the campus gym. Jake had hidden cameras all over town. He pulled up a spreadsheet. Names, times, places, meticulous records of people's routines. My name was there too. I tried to back away, but I heard a mechanical click. The door had locked behind me. Jake turned and smiled, told me I was overreacting, said no one was being hurt, that this was all about memory and truth and honesty. That someday, I'd appreciate what he was trying to build. Then I saw something I still can't shake. In the corner was a small cot. Straps were attached to the frame, and nearby was a table lined with bottles and syringes. Jake noticed me looking and quickly said it was just for emergencies, that sometimes capturing the moment required more than a camera. I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed a folding chair and smashed it into the monitors. Jake shouted, lunged at me, but I slipped past him and ran to the door. I slammed into it with my shoulder, it gave way. I didn't stop running until I hit a busy street. From a nearby gas station, I called the police. By the time they arrived, Jake was gone. The basement had been emptied out. No photos, no cameras, no equipment. The locks were removed, and the walls were bare. The landlord said Jake had moved out overnight without notice. The university confirmed he had withdrawn from classes. No one had seen him since. For months, I couldn't sleep properly. I changed my schedule, my routines, even moved to a different apartment across town. But I still check for cameras when I sit in cafes or walk to class. Sometimes I wake up at night convinced I hear a shutter click. But there's nothing. Just my heartbeat and the dark. I've never been able to answer the question that haunts me most: was Jake ever really my friend, or was I just another name on his list, another face in the crowd he decided to collect? She had a hidden camera in the guest room. My name is Kyle, and this happened about 2 years ago. I was 24, working for a tech startup downtown. The kind of job with long hours, free snacks, and a culture that blurred the line between colleagues and friends. At the time, I felt lucky to be surrounded by people who all seemed eager to hang out after work. One of those people was Rachel. She'd joined the company maybe 6 months earlier and had quickly become an official social planner, always the one suggesting happy hours, trivia nights, or casual get-togethers. She was friendly, outgoing, and easy to talk to. The kind of person you never really questioned because they made everyone feel included. It was a Friday night when this happened. I had stayed late finishing up a client project, and when I finally shut my laptop, Rachel popped her head into my office and invited me out. A few others from the team were heading to a bar nearby. And I figured, why not? I needed the break. The night was normal, laughing over drinks, griping about work, the usual end-of-week venting. Rachel kept the drinks coming, suggesting cocktails I hadn't tried, refilling my glass when it got low. I didn't think much of it at the time. She'd picked the place and seemed to be playing host. By midnight, most of the group had drifted out. One guy left to catch the last train. Another called a ride. I was debating whether to do the same when Rachel mentioned her apartment was just a 10-minute walk away. She said if I didn't feel like spending a fortune on a late-night Uber, I could crash in her guest room. It felt like a nice offer. I wasn't drunk, but I'd had enough that saving the money sounded good. I agreed. Her place was in one of those converted warehouse lofts, high ceilings, exposed brick, stylish lighting, very curated, very clean. I remember thinking it looked like something you'd see in a lifestyle magazine. She gave me a quick tour: kitchen, bathroom, and finally the guest room. It was small but comfortable. A double bed, clean linens, a wall-mounted TV, and a nightstand with a charging cable already plugged in. She brought me a glass of water and a towel, then said goodnight. It all felt perfectly normal. I was honestly impressed by how prepared she was. I fell asleep fast. The next thing I remember was waking up to sunlight and a mild headache. I sat up slowly, stretched, and reached for my phone on the nightstand. That's when I noticed a tiny red light blinking behind the TV. At first, I thought it might be from the TV itself or a cable box, but it didn't quite match anything I recognized. I got up for a closer look. Tucked behind the TV, half hidden by the mount, was a small lens. It was a camera. The red light was a recording indicator. I froze. My mind couldn't quite catch up to what I was seeing. It wasn't some cheap webcam, either. It looked like something higher end. The angle was aimed squarely at the bed. I didn't touch it, just stared for a while. I tried to come up with some innocent explanation, but none made sense. I kept replaying the night in my head, how she had encouraged the drinks, offered her place so casually, how perfect the guest room had been. Too perfect. I scanned the room more carefully, adrenaline rising. Then I saw a small dome in the ceiling that looked like a smoke detector. But something was off about it. The design didn't match the one in the hallway. No blinking light this time, but when I looked closely, I saw another tiny lens. There were two cameras, at least. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and started taking photos, wide shots of the room, close-ups of the devices. I recorded a video walking through, pointing out what I'd found. I didn't know what else to do, but I needed evidence. While filming, I heard soft footsteps outside the door, a knock. Rachel's voice, calm and chipper, asking if I wanted breakfast. I said I'd be out in a minute and tried to steady my breathing. I didn't want to confront her, not yet. I just needed to leave. I packed up my things and opened the door as casually as I could. She was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, smiling like everything was normal. I told her I had to run, made up something about meeting a friend. Her smile didn't fade, but there was a beat of silence. Then she said, "You sure you don't want to stay?" I already made food. Her tone was pleasant, but something in it made me uneasy. It didn't sound like a question. I thanked her again and moved toward the door. She didn't follow, just stood in the kitchen watching. I made it out without another word. Only when I stepped outside did I realize I'd been holding my breath. I went straight to the nearest police station. The officer at the desk didn't seem convinced until I showed him the photos and video. That changed everything. He called in someone else and asked me to explain everything again. Turns out, mine wasn't the first report. Other people had suspected similar things in that building, but no one had proof. What I brought in gave them enough to get a warrant. Rachel wasn't who she said she was. That wasn't her real name. The ID she used at work was fake, the rental application for the apartment forged. When the police searched her place, they found hard drives filled with footage. Dozens of files labeled with first names and dates, I wasn't the only one. The most disturbing part, the footage was being uploaded to a site behind a paywall. The police tracked hundreds of views. Total strangers had been watching people sleeping and dressing, brushing their teeth, just existing. She vanished before she could be arrested, disappeared, without a trace. They found two more fake IDs in her apartment. She'd done this before. Probably still is, somewhere. I changed jobs, moved. Started checking every room I sleep in, every mirror, every smoke detector. My friends think I'm paranoid. I don't care. Because now I know people like her exist. And they don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like your friendly coworker. The one who smiles. The one who offers you a drink.